Listening to that is the Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson. Welcome, Mr. Johnson. We have to be very clear and very careful, of course, about this the evidence in this very serious matter. So you have said it's overwhelmingly likely that Vladimir Putin was responsible. You saw the ambassador brush that aside. Why do you say that?
Well, we gave the Russians a very clear choice, and the Prime Minister said on Monday, as I said to the Russian ambassador to the UK, either help us to understand how the stockpiles of Novichok have gone missing and how some of it could have turned up on the streets of Wiltshire in this way, or else I'm afraid we will be forced, as the Prime Minister said in the House of Commons, to draw the conclusion, as we did in the case of Alexander Litvinenko, that the trail of culpability leads inexorably to the Kremlin. And I think listening to the Russian response, listening again to the response of the Russian ambassador to the EU with his satirical suggestion that this was done by UK agents from Porton Down. This is not the response of a country that really believes itself to be innocent. This is not the response of a country that really wants to engage in getting to the bottom of the matter.
The Prime Minister told the House of Commons there were two possible explanations of this. Either this was a deliberate attack by the Russian state, or else the Novichok had come out and become and got into the hands of criminal gangs. You seem to be excluding the latter possibility now.
We gave the Russians every opportunity to come up with an alternative hypothesis, such as the one that you have just described, and they haven't. And their response has been a sort of mixture of smug sarcasm and denial, obfuscation and delay. So what we are doing on the Novichok and on the nerve agent, what we will do is tomorrow, technical experts from the Organisation for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons will come from The Hague to the UK. We will share the samples with them. They will then be tested by the most reputable possible international laboratories. And I might just say, in response to Mr. Chizov's point about Russian stockpiles of chemical weapons, we actually have evidence within the last 10 years that Russia has not only been investigating the delivery of nerve agents for the purposes of assassination, but has also been creating and stockpiling Novichok.
So that was a direct lie that I was being given there.
But you will get that, and that is exactly the tactics that we've come to expect from Russia over the last few years. And one of the things that has really struck me in the course of the last few days, as we've been talking to friends and colleagues around the world, is the difference between their reaction this time and their reaction to the death of Alexander Litvinenko. And then back in 2006, there was much more hesitation, much more people saying, well, perhaps it could be rogue elements of the Russian state and so on and so forth. Now you have people such as Nikki Haley, the US ambassador to the UN, with her very, very powerful denunciation of Russia, and my colleague Jacek Kapuscinski on Friday in London, pointing the finger squarely at Russia. And I think what that indicates is the change in people's attitudes towards Russia because of the experience of the last 10 years.
Is it change in attitudes, their attitude to us? They don't really care anymore what we do or say.
I think that it's obvious that they do care, and I think that is one of the reasons why the UK is, as it were, in the Kremlin's crosshairs, because they look at us and they think this is the country that time and again has called Russia out, has stood up to Russia when it comes to Crimea, to what they've been doing in Syria. And just to get back to the point I was making just now about international response.
I want to ask you about. Are you absolutely sure it's this mysterious thing called Novichok? We talk about it all the time now. We all assume that it's that. How are we sure?
Well, I obviously, to the best of our knowledge, this is a Russian-made nerve agent that falls within the category Novichok, made only by Russia. And just to get back to the point about the international reaction, which is so fascinating, people have all now experienced, whether it's in America, Germany, France, say nothing of the Baltic countries, the Balkans and Poland, they've all experienced Russian meddling, malign, disruptive Russian behavior over the last few years. They can see a country that is going in the wrong direction. And that's why they're so inclined now to not to give Russia the benefit of the doubt and to stand shoulder to shoulder with the UK.
Do you think, given that background, that 2% is enough for our defence spending? An awful lot of your colleagues, including Tobias Ellwood, Defence Minister, it's no longer enough. What's happened to the dollar, but also the threats that we now face from the East, that we do need to protect ourselves better as a country than we have been doing, and we need to spend more money.
Well, we are one of the biggest spenders on defence in NATO, as you know, where we contribute about 20% of European defence spending already, and it's quite right that we should spend well on our defences. And
my question is, should we be spending more than we are targeted to at the moment?
We must make sure that we are adequately and properly defended, and certainly that is a case that I make, and I know other
Chancellor and
other ministers certainly have been making that case. But when it comes to the defences of this country, we are also ensuring that we're protected against cyber attack and attacks on our critical national infrastructure and other such threats.
We read today that there has been increased worry about attacks on the infrastructure, electricity supply, nuclear power stations, water and so forth. Is that something the government is worried about at the moment?
Well, as I say, it's something, obviously, it's a threat that has changed over the last few years because cyber attacks are a relatively new development, but we have the National Cyber Security Centre. We have fantastic preparations against such threats.
You'll have heard the ambassador talking about Nikolai Glushkov. Do you think the death of Mr. Glushkov is connected to this affair?
That's a matter for the police, and they have to get on with their investigation. I have no evidence of any connection.
Now, the ambassador also said that the Russians are prosecuting the deaths of the daughter, Mr. Kripal, and Mr. Glushkov, because they're both Russian citizens, and that their people will be arriving here and talking to our police, looking for cooperation. Will they get cooperation?
We have wanted cooperation from the Russians in this matter for some days, and we've been greeted with a lot of sarcasm and I think plainly an attitude of a country that is guilty of that. If we can genuinely be of assistance to the Russians in getting to the bottom of what has happened, then we will do that. I rather doubt whether they are entirely serious in what they're doing.
But if Russian investigators arrive in London and say, we're interested in the attack on Yulia and the death of Mr. Glushkov, we would like to work alongside the British police and have access to the investigation that we're conducting, they will be given that.
We will do everything we can to assist in getting to the bottom of what has happened. Whether it is appropriate to have Russian investigators on UK soil engaged in trying to get to the bottom, I somewhat doubt. But what we will certainly do, as I said earlier,
we will help as far as we can.
What we will do is we will ensure that, and this is I'm afraid the ambassador was completely misleading about the UK's obligations under the Organisation for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. We have followed those obligations to the letter. And what we will be doing now is getting the samples and making sure that they are available to the technical experts to allow them to elucidate exactly what they are. And I think you would agree. I think you would agree that they are a rather more reliable, and I think the British people have much more confidence in what they do than in any Russian investigation.
Let's move on to what happens next. We kicked out 23 of their people we regard as spies. They've kicked out 23 of ours. Tit for tat, is that?
Well, there is a normal symmetry in these diplomatic affairs, and you would expect that. Look, you've got to understand...
Is it going to go further than that symmetry is what I'm asking, really?
We will discuss at the National Security Council this week what further measures, if any, we may want to take. But I would just stress this, that the UK is already pursuing a number of measures, hardening our borders. Of course, we're pursuing the diplomatic expulsions.
Let me ask you about money.
But we are also going to be using the tools that are available to us under existing statute to pursue those who may have corruptly obtained their wealth. We will be going further with what is called a Magnitsky clause in the sanctions bill, and so all these things are moving forward
2
at
weeks
the same
ago,
time.
the Labour Party put down Magnitsky Act amendments, and the Conservatives voted against them. Why was that?
Well, there were deficiencies in the way those amendments were drafted which didn't make them suitable. But we are working to get provisions that will allow those who have been responsible for gross violations of human rights to be prosecuted and not to be able to come to this country.
To be absolutely clear, you are going to, as a government, you're going to go after named individuals who have in the past been able to wash their money through London, invest in housing and so forth, and you're going to grab their money.
Well, we live in a democracy under the rule of law. It's not open to me, as a politician in this country, to direct the law enforcement agencies to go after such and such a person. That's what they do in Russia. What we have said, and what we have statute now since April last year under the Criminal Finance Act to do this. We have said that where people have obtained wealth by corruption, and where we can see a link with the Kremlin, with Vladimir Putin, it may be possible to have unexplained wealth orders and other sanctions on those individuals. And that work is going on now, and it will be intensifying. But you would not expect me. You would not expect me to reveal the names.
Labour says that part of the Conservative hesitation in this is that you, as a party, have been taking far too much Russian money for far too long. And there's the case of the lady Lyubov Chernukin, who paid £160,000 to have a game of tennis with you.
Yeah.
Did that game actually take place?
Can I just make a point about this whole anti?
You're going to say good Russians and bad Russians. I know that.
I am actually. I'm going to.
I was going to say back to you that this lady's husband was a minister of Vladimir Putin and was given an award by Vladimir Putin. So he was close to the regime. And you, as a party, were prepared to take £160,000 from her so that she could have a game of tennis with Boris Johnson.
Well,
bit odd.
If there is evidence of gross corruption in the way that gentleman you mentioned obtained his wealth, then it is well within the. It is possible for our law enforcement agencies to deprive him of his wealth with an unexplained wealth order. That is a matter for the authorities. It's not a matter for me, and it is very, very important now because I'm getting a lot of people are emailing me from Russia who feel that Russians. No, it's very, very important that we stress
I agree with that, but
the Russians themselves are in no way the object of our wrath.
I accept that. I just want to pursue this particular case, if I may.
We have no quarrel with the Russian people.
Did the tennis game actually happen?
It did.
It did. Are you happy that the same lady, and again, do you know enough about the origins of that money? And she has now paid £30,000 to sit next to the Defence Secretary, Gavin Williamson, and have dinner with him. Are you happy about that?
Look, unless and until evidence is produced against individual Russians, I do not think that the entire nation should be calumnified.
It's a difficult balance. I absolutely agree with that.
It is very, very important. There are many Russians who have come to this country and made their lives here and contributed magnificently to our culture and our society. And they feel threatened.
I understand that. So, but on the other hand,
it is very important.
Let me remind you what Marina Litvinenko, the widow of Mr. Litvinenko, Sasha, said. She said, Theresa May and the Conservatives need to be very selective who you're friends with. When you allow people with money to come to your country and make a business, you need to be sure what kind of money these people try to bring to your country. Because very often, she said, it had come about inappropriately. All I'm saying is it's very difficult to know exactly the source of the money that you take.
Well, that's why we have the National Crime Agency, that's why we have the National Economic Crime Unit. That's what they are there to do. They are there to get to the bottom of whether somebody's wealth has been obtained corruptly or not. But really and truly, it is very important that we do not allow a miasma of suspicion about all Russians in London, and indeed all rich Russians in London, to be created. Some of them, some of them may have obtained their wealth by corruption. And I have to say, I think it is quite extraordinary at a time when you have two people lying gravely ill in hospital in Salisbury, when a police officer is still is still not out of hospital, for the fire somehow to be turned on Conservative Party funding. As far to the best of my knowledge, all possible checks have been made, and they will continue to be made.
You'll have seen the story this morning about Cambridge Analytica, this data collection company, in trouble for harvesting information from Facebook and then using it to target potential voters. They were involved in the Brexit referendum and the American elections as well.
Yeah,
they've been summoned back to the House of Commons.
Yeah.
Do you think there should be a proper investigation into this?
I've got to be honest with you, Andrew, it's not something I've focused on.
Well, let's move to something you have focused on, I'm sure.
But I'm sure if there are, if again, I mean, the general point can be made. If there's some crime or then I'm sure that the law must follow its course.
The Brexit Select Committee has suggested that we may have to delay the triggering of Article 50 because we're not ready. What's your response?
Well, I don't think that's true at all, and I think that we're making great progress in the negotiations, and I hope that we'll get a good deal on the implementation period in March. And I think the House of Commons voted overwhelmingly to trigger Article 50, and let's get on with it.
There's another report today, however, saying that our border arrangements simply won't be ready in time. We need more time to do this. Are you concerned that the thing is going to slip?
No, I think I think what most people in this country want, whether they voted leave or to remain, they want us to get on and do with it.
Why did you feel it necessary to write a letter to the Prime Minister saying that there might be a hard Irish border? What I said, I don't wish to I've got the quote here. We can help you with the quote.
You can. What you have is, I'm afraid, only
it is wrong to see our task as maintaining no border. Even if a hard border is reintroduced, we would expect 95% of goods to pass. So you use the phrase hard border twice, which is interesting because you are a member of a government which says there's not going to be a hard border.
The whole point about the letter was to say we don't need a hard border, okay? And that's the policy of the government, and that's what we're going to produce. And if you read the Prime Minister's Mansion House speech, which was excellent, you will have seen. You will have seen that she produced a number of solutions for the avoidance of a hard border, and that was what I was advocating, and that was if you had the entire document, it would be very clear.
You said you were going to publish the letter. When are you going to do that?
Well, we do not. It is up to the media organisations that leaked a part of it. If they choose to,
you said you would publish it.
Well, it turns out that
you've changed your mind.
We do not, as a matter of course, respond to leaks by putting the whole thing into the public domain. But I can assure you that the letter said the exact opposite of what you have just claimed it said.
Well, I've just read a bit of it. So,
I know.
These are words, and
yes, I know,
words mean things and so forth.
And they don't, as it happens, mean what you want them to mean.
It is wrong to see our task as maintaining no border. The government's only aim should be stop this border becoming significantly harder, even if a hard border is reintroduced, you say, and then you go on.
Well, well,
let me read it. Publish it.
What I was saying is very clearly in line with what the government as a whole has been saying for a long time, which is there is no need to have a hard border. There are ways of avoiding it, as the Prime Minister said in her excellent Mansion House speech, and I suggest that you quote that and read that and put
that.
Okay,
I'm going to quote something back at you as well. Do you think that Russia intervened in the Brexit referendum?
I have no evidence for that.
You've said in the past you didn't think they successfully intervened, but you have no evidence that they intervened at all.
Well, I certainly have no evidence that they successfully intervened, no.
Certainly not. OK,
no.
One last Brexit-related question, then we can move on. We haven't spoken for a little while. As one of the great cheerleaders for Brexit, when you look at what's happening now, when you look at the fact that the European Court will have some influence on us after we leave, when you look at the fact that we're going to be paying money in to be members of some agencies, and you look at the timescale of all of this, are you completely cheerful that it has turned out as you wanted it to do?
I think we've got ourselves into. I do. I think that the Mansion House speech was a great step forward, and I think it shows exactly the type of deal we want to get. We're not going to have the influence of the European Court of Justice. We're not. I don't know why you're saying all this sort of BBC claptrap.
No,
we're not going to be paying in. We're not going to be paying in.
If it's claptrap, it's the Prime Minister's claptrap.
We're not going to be paying in. We're not going to be paying in after we come out. Yes, there will be an implementation period, but after we come out, we'll have what is effectively a gigantic free trade deal with all sorts of bolt-ons. And the advantage of the new arrangements, as the Prime Minister spelt out at Mansion House, is that it will be possible for either side to do things differently, to do things in their own way, and
so
there will be an independent arbitration panel that will be able to decide whether. Can I just finish the point? So you just respect me.
Okay.
There will be an independent arbitration panel that will be able to decide whether or not there is a distortion of trade entailed. So we have, on money, on borders, on laws, you are seeing the fulfilment of the pledge to take back control.
We have also taken back. We have to take back control of the clock and the time, because we have run out of time. Boris Johnson, for now. Thank you very much indeed. Now, look at what's coming up straight after this program.